حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. We seek refuge with Allah from Satan, the one who is cursed, with the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Glory be to Allah, praise be to Allah, and there is none worthy of worship except Allah, and there is no power or might except from Allah, the Most High, the Most Great. We ask Allah to send His peace and blessings upon Muhammad ﷺ and his family and his companions, and all of the successive generations from the time of the Prophet ﷺ up to the present, who have held on to Islam to the extent that now we are standing here today representing Islam. And may Allah allow us to carry on that tradition. I call you all and I call myself to be mindful of Allah's presence and to fear Allah. One of the attributes of Allah, two attributes in particular, refers to Allah as being al-Basir, Allah having sight, and al-Basir, Allah seeing all things. Allah mentions in the Quran where He says, فَمَن يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ, and also وَمَن يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَهُ. Talking about everything that we do, every action that we engage in, that is good, that we shall, that even as small as a speck of dust, that we shall see it on the day of judgment. And everything that we do of evil, regardless of how small it is, insignificant we might think it to be, that we shall see it on the day of judgment. So may we be mindful of that in our actions every day. The topic that I'm trying to convey today, inshallah, with the help of Allah, is a topic about two things, one being the commitment and one being compassion. Commitment to the tradition and compassion with people. And part of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this topic is because much of the trauma that we face or that we experience in community is directly tied to a lot of the things that we experience with different people in our community. And so when you look at, currently there's like a rise in third spaces where people are creating communities, being intentional about creating communities outside of the masjid because of the trauma that they experience in the masjid. And oftentimes the different issues that people have experienced in the masjid was presented to them it was in a sense presented to them as pure Islam, or someone who was a devout Muslim trying to tell another Muslim how to be a Muslim, and different things that happen to people that trigger people and create this phenomenon of now people are saying, you know what, I don't want to go to the masjid. I don't need the masjid. Let's create this Muslim space that's away from the masjid. And unfortunately, I feel the image of a person who doesn't yield, who is strong and passionate about their religion, has been conflated with the imagery of someone who doesn't have compassion. But when you look at the example of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, you see someone who you can't show anyone who was better at embodying the Quran. You can't show someone who was more committed to the tradition. And yet he was the opposite of what we see when we think of someone who's really devout to the tradition. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this topic of commitment and compassion. So when you look at the Prophet ﷺ, and you look at the kind of atmosphere that he created in his community, you see that the Prophet ﷺ had such a personality that people felt welcoming when they saw him. Like, the Prophet ﷺ's personality was such that when people would talk to him, it could be someone who only spoke with him a couple of times, but they felt like they had a special connection with him. And the Prophet ﷺ would disarm people's anxieties. He would make them feel comfortable where they would come to him and ask him all kinds of questions. There's a story of someone who came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he was asking him, like, who's your favorite person? And this is someone who, he was kicking it with the Prophet, so he felt like, man, I must be his favorite person, man, because, the way he treats me, man, we're best friends. So he asked the Prophet ﷺ, who's your best friend? And the Prophet ﷺ refers to his wife. And the companion is like, okay, you said your wife, I understand. She's probably somewhere around here, she's probably listening to the conversation. I know you gotta say that, Every brother who's married, I'm sure, you're gonna say your wife. If you're a smart man. It's winter time, you don't wanna be on the sofa, so you're gonna say your wife. You know what I'm saying? So he said, okay. Forget that, like after your wife, who's your best friend? And the Prophet ﷺ mentions Abu Bakr as the story goes. And I say that to say that the Prophet ﷺ had such a way of dealing with people that every person, he was present with them to the extent that everyone felt like they were his best friend. He had that rapport that he built with his companions, right? And once again, tying it back to the idea that this is someone who is undoubtedly committed to the tradition. He is not bending the rules to appeal to the powers. He is strong in his conviction, but he does not embody what we would call righteousness in the same way, in the same dressing that we see. And oftentimes we look at the communities that we engage in. And I know myself, growing up, there's many times where, as a Black American Muslim, where I felt like people felt like they had to teach me my religion. Now granted, I definitely do not know there's way more things I do not know than there are things that I do know. I wouldn't even call myself a student of Islam. I'm trying to be a servant of the community, and may Allah allow me to increase in knowledge, and I'll always increase in knowledge. But the idea that someone doesn't know you, didn't build a rapport with you, they didn't ask you how your day was, and then they're going to come to you and tell you how to be a Muslim, as if they're the designated teacher of you, right? And when you look at the Prophet ﷺ and the people that came to him, his way of disarming their anxiety had such an effect to where he didn't have to come at them and be like, yo, brother, your pants leg, what's up with your pants leg, bro? You gotta roll the pants legs up. That wasn't the Prophet's approach to being committed to the tradition. The Prophet ﷺ didn't have to go to brothers, oh, brother, what's your name? MashaAllah, that's a beautiful name. Do you know what it means, brother? Like, the Prophet ﷺ had the social intelligence, he had that compassion, and he was present with people. And we looked at an example that's attributed to his grandchildren, Hassan and Hussein, the children of Ali and Fatima. There's a story that I think is really good, which ties into the component of being committed to the tradition, but also being committed to compassion. When they saw an older gentleman who was making wudu, and it became clear to them that this person was not making it correctly. So think about this. How does this story unfold in many communities? When you see someone who's doing something that's not correct, or someone who may have some shortcomings, right? So when they see this person, they're trying to decide, they're younger and he's a lot older, and we know that the age difference could present a barrier in terms of trying to give them good advice. So what they decided to do was, they ran to him, their plan was to go to the older gentleman and ask him to judge them on who's making wudu the best. And one of them made it entirely incorrect. Like, he was throwing water everywhere, you know what I'm saying? Wasting water in the desert. That's a no-no. You don't do that, Just putting that out there. And then the other one, Islam was saying. The other one, he started doing it correctly. And upon seeing how he was doing it, the older gentleman immediately recognized, oh wow, that's the correct way to do it. Right? And I said to say, there's nothing wrong with trying to improve personally and also trying to help other people come to improve themselves as well. But we have to make sure that we are embodying, not only being committed to tradition and the letter of the law, but that we're also embodying the spirit of the law, and that we're being compassionate when we're speaking to our brothers and sisters in the community. You know, and we see the example of the Prophet ﷺ, and this is one of my favorite examples because it just seems so bizarre that I would imagine that if something like that happened in this day and age, that same person would get tackled and probably jumped and kicked out of the masjid, right? And I always have this joke, the story about the Bedouin who peed in the masjid. The joke going that, you know, he was from my tribe, me and him from the same tribe, you know, McDuck, you know, same tendencies. So as the story goes, the Bedouin, he comes into the masjid and he's peeing in the masjid. And as he's peeing in the masjid, we all know that peeing in the masjid is wrong. But you ain't supposed to pee in the masjid. You shouldn't pee in public, but you definitely shouldn't pee in the masjid. That's 2 violations right there. Probably more, depending on the stench. But anyway, besides the point. So they see him peeing in the masjid, and the companions immediately want to jump on him. They're like, yo, like, no, we ain't having this, man. And you can imagine Umar would be like, yo, man, let's offer this head, bro. Let's hammer this dude, man. Like, for real. Like, they're like, no, he's disrespecting the masjid. So, a perfect example of compassion and commitment. The Prophet ﷺ, he not only he tells them to stop, he's like, no, don't do this. And this is a paraphrasing. Muhammad Oda, Tafsir Muhammad Oda cares. So he says, no, let's wait. He holds him back. Calm down. Let the brother finish doing what he's doing. And you can imagine the companions are like, yo, he's peeing in the masjid. It's clearly wrong. There's no ambiguity there. We know he's wrong in violating the culture and ethics in it. And the Prophet said, stop. This is something to think about before continuing with the story. Think about this. When we see somebody doing something we know is wrong, From my personal experience, especially dealing with a lot of high schoolers and the discussions that come out when we're having these discussions, oftentimes their knowledge is not what's they're aware of what they're doing, and it's not lack of knowledge that's causing them to engage in whatever it is that they're engaging in. A lot of times what you'll find is that your relationship to a person, your proximity to a person's heart is more powerful in helping them do better than words, you know, of condemnation and, oh, brother, this is wrong, and you know the Quran says this. Because oftentimes people know that it's mentioned in the Quran. You know? And so the Prophet ﷺ told them to wait. And then after that, he didn't jump on him after that. He said, no, wait, wash it up. He didn't even have the man who peed in the masjid wash up his mess. He had his other companions clean up the mess. And then finally he spoke to the man after that, right? And to tell him about, you know, this is a masjid, you know, we don't pee in the masjid, you know, and with a respectful, kind demeanor that was committed to the tradition. He didn't give him permission to do something that was explicitly wrong and impermissible. But at the same time, he did not jump on him and make him get to the point where now he's like, oh man, I forget these Muslims, man. Even though I kind of feel he should have known he shouldn't pee in the masjid. But that's another story altogether, though. You know. So that's an example of the Prophet ﷺ, the person that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presented the Quran to us through. You know. This is a person who embodies the Quran, as his wife Aisha is reported to have said that he was the Quran walking. There's no one you can look at that is a better example of following the rules and regulations of the Quran than him. And yet he does not fit the same stereotypes that we see when we think of people who are supposed to be heroes of the Quran and righteous and strong. It gets to the point sometimes where you think, and I'm using myself where I think, because I can't speak on everyone else, but it seems like the meaner you are, the least you smile, the more connected you are to the tradition, maybe. That's how people, the impression they give you, like, brothers are always serious, stuff for all this, stuff for all that. Brother, what you doing? Brother, what's your name? Brother, roll up your pants leg. Brother, you didn't pronounce that correctly. Brother, you could go on and on and on and on. And yet you have the example of the best example of how to implement the Quran being the complete opposite. You know, some of the Bedouins, they were joking about, I don't kiss my children. And the Prophet ﷺ was saying, I kiss my children. Like, I'm not going to let you define what it means to be a man. A man cannot show affection. A man cannot smile. A man cannot be happy. A man cannot cry. No, the Prophet ﷺ claimed that, right? And another example that stood out to me, and this is something that I feel is really important to look at because, you know, we are human beings, and sexuality is a real thing, right? You know, if you're a brother, you know, especially, you know, good-looking brother like this one brother right here, you know what I'm saying? I'm sure there's a lot of struggles that you have to deal with, you know, in terms of like fighting off all the fitna. And we see the example of a boy who comes to the Prophet ﷺ, and this is something that really stood out to me, because in my mind I was thinking, if I had that same question, would I feel comfortable coming to any adult that I know? Would I feel comfortable asking my parents this question that this Sahabi asked the Prophet ﷺ? This young boy, he goes to the Prophet ﷺ and he asks the Prophet ﷺ, yo, it's just paraphrasing again, hey man, give me permission to commit fornication. Basically, he's like, yo, Prophet of Allah, I want to get it in, man. Give me permission, yo. Please give me permission, Prophet of God. Now think about this though. That seems like, how many of us are as respectful as the Prophet ﷺ? How many of us in this room are at the same status of the Prophet ﷺ in terms of dignity, right? And yet, for someone to ask us that question is so unbelievable. Like, I can't imagine someone asking me that question, and I'm nothing remotely close to the Prophet ﷺ in terms, you know, I'm not even remotely close. So this kid, one thing to look at before continuing with the story, this kid felt comfortable enough to come to the Prophet ﷺ. So that's another sign that looking at ourselves when we're engaging in community, to make sure that we try to keep that in mind, that when we're engaging with people who are struggling different from how we're struggling, none of us are perfect, but we don't want to get into that position of we're going to condemn someone for sinning differently. You know, this brother struggles with this brother struggles with that. You know what I'm saying? One brother might be addicted to alcohol, one person might be addicted to pornography, one brother might be addicted to something else, and we're going to look down on them because we're not sinning the way that they're sinning. Well, we got all kinds of things that we're struggling with, right? So we want to make sure that we create that culture where people can feel comfortable coming to us. Which is prophetic. This is how the prophet was. So the boy asked him that, and of course, as what happened in the earlier story, the companions are like, yo, man, how are you going to ask the prophet this, man? How are you going to ask the prophet? Did you really just ask the prophet this, right? And the prophet was like, just you know, calm down. He's not making faces or anything. And he tells the young man, he's like, would you want this for your mother? He asked him this question, a serious question. You know, I know just putting some other commentary in it. You know, it's not Ibn Kathir or, you know, don't take it or leave it. He said, the idea like, you know, would you want your mother to engage in this activity, right? Think about it from that perspective, right? And I can't imagine even someone who's a womanizer. Womanizers don't want people to do what they do to women to their mothers. So the Prophet ﷺ first created a space for the young man to feel comfortable talking to him. And then he, instead of just telling him, brother, you just do this. Because this is something, sidebar conversation, when I was growing up, a lot of times when I had questions, a lot of times the community, the brothers would be like, nah, but listen, brother, why are you asking these questions, brother? Just pray, and this is what Allah says in the Quran, this is what the Prophet says in the Hadith. You gotta do it, brother, that's it, plus. There would be no explanation. And I was walking away like thinking like, but I still don't necessarily agree with what you're saying, but give me some kind of commentary to the concept. This is once again the opposite of the Prophet ﷺ. He wasn't afraid of people asking questions. Right? And when he addressed the young kid, he didn't just give him an order. He gave him some reason. He explained to him in a way that he personalized that response and gave him a reason why he should rethink why he wants to do what he wants to engage in. And he said, you wouldn't want that for your daughter either. And the story goes on and on. So, once again, when we're thinking about community and we're interacting with people, and people coming from different perspectives of life, we want to make sure that we be mindful of that. You know, that we're mindful of how we're interacting with people, and that we're committed to the tradition. We're not bending the tradition. We're not feeding into the fears of society. People say Muslims are backwards, Muslims are ignorant, Muslims are terrorists. Oh, let's try to make Islam, let's try to accommodate for. No, we're not bending our tradition, but we're also at the same time trying to make sure that we couple that with compassion. And another example of the compassion of the Prophet ﷺ, when you look at, the thing I think about is siblings. The thing I'm thinking about is siblings is that each one of your siblings have different characteristics, different strengths, different weaknesses. And the advice you give to one, you may not give to the other, depending on their strengths and their weaknesses. And you see that in the Prophet's life as well. When the Prophet ﷺ was giving the same kind of advice, a person asked whether or not he can kiss his wife, and the Prophet tells one of them, no, you cannot kiss your wife. Another person asked the Prophet, can you kiss his wife? While they're fasting, the conduct was during Ramadan while you're fasting, can you kiss your wife? He told one of them no, and he told another Sahabi, yes. Now, if you, on the outside looking in, if you come from the perspective of the Prophet says one thing, this applies to everyone, all times, everyone has to follow it, there's no difference of opinion, you might get the impression that these are contradictory statements. But in the background of the people who he was speaking to, one of them was an older gentleman who the Prophet ﷺ felt could control himself, right? And he told him, yeah, this one, you're a vet, man. You've been married for you know what I'm saying? You can control yourself. I see you, bro. You know, you're a Jedi, man. You can take that. But the young brother, probably a newlywed brother, he was like, nah, brother, stay away from your wife, bro. Don't even tap her on the shoulders. No, you can't do none of that, you know. So the Prophet ﷺ, even when he's giving instructions, even when he was giving people advice on what to do in matters of Islam, he still embodied the commitment to the tradition and compassion. May Allah allow us to embody commitment to the tradition and compassion. One thing to consider, and as I close, is that our Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said that there'll come a time when holding on to the religion will be like holding on to hot coals. And I feel that we're living in that time right now. And if there's anything that we can take away from what I was trying to convey, is that it's hard enough being a Muslim. It's hard enough being righteous, period. And in society, there's an attack on Islam in particular, and religion in general. There's an attack on religion. And so, we should try our best to not add to that. We don't want to, we already, it's a struggle enough as it is. We don't want to be another thorn in our brothers and our sisters' back, making it harder for them to commit to the tradition. And so, inshallah, to the best of our ability, may Allah allow us to be committed to the tradition, to live and to die as Muslims. May Allah allow us to embody the compassion. May Allah forgive us for all the things that we do, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Ya Allah, forgive us. Ya Allah, allow us to benefit from our parents. while they are still alive, Ya Allah. And when they pass, Ya Allah, allow us to benefit them. Ya Allah, connect the community, keep us close to one another, keep us consistent, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, expand our hearts, Ya Allah. Expand this community, allow it to increase in number, allow it to increase in activity, allow the Muslims here at Howard University to be an example of Islam all around the world that people are looking at. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Oh Allah, give us the good in this life and the life in the hereafter, and save us from the pains of the fire.